stuff. The stuff of history.
Magnificent sight out here.
The stuff of dreams.
The world, for once, could feel as a world.
But who really won the space race?
Sputnik rung our bell, and then we went to the moon and declared victory and said it was all over.
Now, 25 years after the first steps on the moon, what's the next step in space? This is CNN Presents with Bernard Shaw, Judy Woodruff, Frank Sesno, and Susan Rook. Tonight, join Judy Woodruff for a ride on man's ultimate journey as CNN presents The Apollo Legacy.
The year was 1969. It was a year when the world was riveted by the sight of a man taking a walk that left the first footprints on the moon. Welcome to CNN Presents. I'm Judy Woodruff. In 1969, skirts were short, hair was long, making love was in, making war was not. In the sports world, New York reigned with the jet-setting Jets and the miracle Mets. It was a year the censors would just as soon forget. A straight-laced-looking comedy duo named the Smothers Brothers laced their act with anti-establishment wit.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
And an X-rated movie, Midnight Cowboy, walked away with the year's Best Picture Oscar. A farm in the New York Catskills became a symbol of the new generation. And the culture and the counterculture rolled along on a collision course. But one event more than any other commanded the world's attention, the Apollo 11 mission. It has been 25 years since 3 U.S. astronauts left on a voyage that took us where no one had gone before. And tonight, CNN's John Zarrella and John Holloman take stock of what has been gained, what was lost, and where it all might lead. John Zarrella begins our look at the Apollo legacy.
Going to the moon was a glorious accident in human history, a confluence of events and circumstances, inspired technology, and illuminated the human spirit.
I was strolling on the moon one day in the merry, merry month of December. May, that's right.
I still feel that it was probably the most wonderful engineering event to take place in history since the pyramids, and I was damn proud to have been a part of it.
Man, we are really going up a hill, I'll tell you.
Instantaneously, the world watching, with maybe, what, a 2-second delay for the signal to get back from the moon.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
But instantaneously, the world was there. And to me, that unifying feature is one of the untold and unmeasured benefits of the program, where the world, for once, could feel as a world.
We have just dipped our big toe into the ocean of the universe, proclaimed the great rocket scientist Wernher von Braun. But with the moon achieved, no obvious realistic goal remained. Nothing to incite and inflame the passions of the American people.
That's how cultures do. No culture stays focused and does things efficiently very long. They wobble around, they go this way, and then they lose interest and go that way and back.
The space program's got to be interesting, it's got to be exciting, it's got to be fun. And when you talk about going to the moon, as President Kennedy did 30-plus years ago, that got people's attention.
The sudden rush of Apollo dwarfed the measured march outward of the human species. The question is, are we still marching? And if so, to where?
What we need in our space program is a sense of journey. We are going someplace, and with humans, we have to be going someplace. It's interesting.
If you don't make the plans today, it won't happen. And to think that we will always be great leads us down, I think, a blind path. If you look back in history, as many historians have recommended that we do, you will see many great nations that finally ceased to be great simply because they stopped investing in their future.
Today's space shuttle has provided NASA with moments of great inspiration. A platform for repairing a bleary-eyed space telescope and capturing and repairing satellites in orbit.
All got a good grip? Yes, sir. Houston, I think we got a satellite.
Yeah, we're watching down here. We got a lot of smiles down here, Dan.
But more often, it has been a source of frustration, never living up to its unrealistic billing.
5, 4, and we have a main engine shutdown at T-minus 3 seconds.
It wasn't and isn't routine or reliable. It's a very fragile system from which we have learned a lot. I think it's time to move. I mean, after all, it's been, what, 22 years since we approved the shuttle.
And shuttle, in the minds of many, never goes anywhere interesting.
You know, it's the most sophisticated flying machine man has ever created in his history, and yet unfortunately it doesn't go anywhere, and it just doesn't do much, and that's probably the downfall of what we call our space program today. It's really more of a series of space events than a space program.
Space events that come at a tremendous cost.
The amount of money in the NASA budget this year is of the order for the shuttle of $5 billion. How many flights? 6 flights. That's over $800 million a flight. There's nothing you can put up in space that's worth $800 million at a shot.
But NASA places at least some of the blame on inconsistent leadership from presidents and Congress.
You know, the shuttle was built without a destination. NASA first proposed that we have a space station with a space shuttle. We took already the space station, so there wasn't a destination. So the shuttle just goes up and back. It doesn't do what it was designed to do.
That, NASA hopes, is about to change if the United States stands by its commitments to new global space partners. This is a mock-up of a portion of the International Space Station. Mankind's future in space may well depend upon whether the real flight hardware ever makes it into orbit 240 miles above the Earth. Some station hardware is already being built in Huntsville, Alabama. The first sections are to be placed in orbit by the shuttle in 1997. The station, once called Freedom, and primarily a U.S. effort, is now a multinational undertaking combining financial and technical resources. Longer than a football field, this laboratory in the sky is expected to produce advances in medicine, material and earth sciences, and answer questions about human exposure to long durations in space. The kinds of science that can't be done on the shuttle.
That's going to do a lot of good for lots of people. That is going to be a real beacon, and I mean something you can see and it will reflect the light. And that will attract lots of good things, not only international cooperation, but how people look at math and science and how we just deal with one another in this whole world.
But Congress has never shown more than lukewarm support for a space station. NASA takes some of the blame. In 1984, the agency said Freedom would cost $8 billion. By 1989, the cost was at $25 billion.
It is expensive. Some of the people who sold the space station early underestimated its cost. And then when the real cost came up, people were saying, "You're lying to me." And so we lost our credibility.
By 1991, with NASA's Cadillac in space estimated at $38 billion, Congress had had enough. The space agency was forced to redesign and downsize. The price tag for the U.S. portion of the new International Space Station, $17.4 billion.
And if we choose not to do this, I'm convinced that Russia and the other nations that are involved in this partnership will probably go their own way and be there without us.
The United States would again be left with a shuttle to nowhere, and the possibility that American men and women might no longer travel in space.
Without the space station, there is right now no envisioned ongoing mission for the space shuttle. One of my fears is that if we lost the space station, we'd lose the space shuttle with it as well. And some of the adversaries of the space station are beginning to prepare to kill the shuttle.
Gutting the space program would save the nation only about 1/2% of the federal budget.
If we close the barn doors and say we've done it all, we've gone to the moon, we've built shuttle, we've got washing machines and telephone, we don't need anything else, I promise you we're going to be one of those second-rate third world nations in generations to come, and we can't afford to do that.
But if America shuts off the space program, shuts down the space station, no one for 5, 10, 15 years will feel the impact. But boy, will it hit 20 years from now.
Through the Cold War days of the 1960s, the space program ticked along, building its own momentum. A goal, an end was clearly in sight, 250,000 miles away. The expense was explained and rationalized within the context of the era. Those days are gone, but the program remains.
We created in Apollo an idea of what space was about, dramatic, high visibility exploration that was not sustainable. And so I think we've had almost a 30-year, 25-year hangover from that heady experience.
I'd like to just let what I believe history will record, that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow.
NASA's greatest enemy is and has been the Apollo legacy.
CNN Presents is brought to you by Excedrin. When you have a headache, choose Excedrin, the headache medicine.
For the aches and pains and sore shoulders of life, I keep Tylenol around, have forever. But headaches are different. Headaches, I use Excedrin. Because Excedrin relieves headaches better than Tylenol. How do I know? They have reports and medical research to prove it, but you know what? I really don't care about all that. I use it. That's how I know it's better. I use it.
Excedrin, the headache medicine.
Quality improvement.
TQM.
Delighting customers.
Continuous improvement.
Theory of constraints.
Re-engineering. No matter what you call it, only one transportation management company has the knowledge to deliver it. We're Ruan Transportation Management Systems, providing American business with powerful new tools to increase productivity and reduce transportation costs. Let's talk. Ruan, improving quality through knowledge.
Dad, could you leave the door open a crack?
How's that?
Could you check the closet one more time?
Nothing here.
Are you sure there's nothing under my bed?
No, no monsters here. Okay?
Okay.
Good night, buddy.
Dad?
Yeah?
Could you leave the hall light on?
Retirement years should be secure years. That's why Merrill Lynch has a gerontologist to help us understand the social, emotional, and financial needs these years bring. That extra insight can make a difference between seeking security and finding it. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
CNN Presents continues now with the Apollo legacy.
This is how the space race started. October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 into orbit. The U.S. declared it over July 20th, 1969 at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In between, the United States conducted a crash program to catch and eventually pass the Russians in space. The new president, John Kennedy, like many Americans, was afraid of Soviet superiority in space, worried that any nation that could launch a satellite could send a nuclear missile anywhere on Earth.
We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge and understanding.
People suddenly looked up and said, what are the Russians doing to us? This thing's going over us 90 minutes. They're looking at us. They're spying on us. What are they going to drop on us?
Kennedy's counsel, Theodore Sorensen, says the decision to go to the moon came after a reporter for Time magazine asked for a presidential interview. The subject, what will the U.S. do next in space? The president told Sorensen,
I want you to gather in your office the people who know this subject best and explore what we can do. What are our alternatives now that we're behind? So I brought together in my office, not for some vast federal decision at that time, but really to prepare for his meeting with a journalist.
Kennedy decided on a manned moon mission because his advisors told him it was one area where the U.S. and Soviets would be playing on a level field. The U.S. had to control space. That was the unspoken goal of Project Apollo.
And what Apollo meant was military power. And John, it was power without arrogance. Here's your demonstration of your muscle without having to flex the thing. Here was power. The world understood it, and you didn't have to, anybody have to fear it. A nation that can do that, my God, if they can go on the moon and land with, they can do anything they want to do.
The first step for the U.S. was to catch up to Sputnik. A team of German rocket scientists, headed by Wernher von Braun, had surrendered to the U.S. at the end of World War II. The team was assembled in Huntsville, Alabama. Its first satellite, Explorer 1, was launched January 31st, 1958. There were failures along the way. One by one, American unmanned rockets blew up on the launch pad. And although the Russians didn't publicize their failures, there were many. In October 1960, an unmanned probe to Mars failed to lift off. Most of the Soviet launch team went to the pad to investigate. 165 people were killed. But just 6 months later, the Russians sent the first man into space. Yuri Gagarin orbited the planet on April 12, 1961. For the United States, the early manned program was called Project Mercury, and 7 pilots were picked to be the first astronauts.
We were told how delightful it would be to get on top of a rocket in a capsule and go around the world. I was looking for the no desk. I wanted out of there right away. I had no interest whatsoever in that. They went on to explain, well, don't worry, we're going to send chimpanzees first. I knew I wanted out of there. But of course, I checked with my peers, and they all said, look, Sharoff, you want to go higher, farther, and faster. This is the way to do it.
The launch pad was moved from Alabama to Florida, a place called Cape Canaveral. This is the button that sent the first American into space. It's located in the middle of the firing room for the Mercury space program. From this blockhouse, a team of German and American scientists sent Alan Shepard into space 1 month after Gagarin's flight.
Liftoff and the clock has started. This is Freedom 7. The fuel is go.
1 month later, President Kennedy announced his bold mission for Project Apollo, to send Americans to the moon.
No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Kennedy was able to match the dreams of centuries to the politics of the moment. That's leadership, is taking an opportunity for making something happen and choosing something that has almost transcendent value.
It took more than $20 billion to build the huge Saturn rockets and capsules that would send men to the moon, and the costs were more than in dollars. The crew for the first mission, Apollo 1, Virgil Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were testing their capsule. It was filled with pure oxygen. When a fire broke out inside the cabin, all three were killed.
I think he expected better workmanship out of everybody, and it didn't happen that way.
The Apollo fire forced NASA to redesign the capsule.
I don't think we would have gotten to the moon in the 60s had we not had the fire. That's a terrible thing to say, but I think it is the truth. It gave us a time period to reflect back on what we were doing in the design of the spacecraft.
The Soviets never said they were racing to the moon, but these pictures of a Soviet-built lunar lander offer proof that they were. And when the first man to ever walk in space was a Soviet, the space race intensified. After a series of unmanned and non-lunar flights to get ready.
The weather is certainly go. It's a beautiful morning for a launch to the moon.
On July 16th, 1969,
all the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting.
Apollo 11
ignition sequence start.
Was ready to leave the Earth.
2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Tower clear.
4 days later, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins made history.
I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
Aldrin and Armstrong stayed on the lunar surface for just 2 hours and 31 minutes.
Two human beings, such as us, prancing around or all by ourselves on the moon, are further away than people have ever been before from their homeland.
Men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. It came in peace for all mankind.
Reaction on Earth was overwhelming.
For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one.
And I had the TV on for the touchdown on the moon. And that's when I really cried. I realized, my God, we've done it.
There were parades all over the world.
In May of '61, we could make a decision, as momentous as it was, to send people to the moon and bring them back safely, and in just a little over 8 years accomplish that. That will stand, I think, as a monumental demonstration of human capability.
But this major U.S. victory was an equally embarrassing Soviet defeat.
I was a little bit jealous that our American colleagues had accomplished that mission, and it wasn't me personally, and I wasn't on the moon with them.
We were, I think, the only country not to televise the landing of Armstrong on the moon. I think that is an example of when universal values are being sacrificed in favor of politics.
But as soon as the cheering stopped, there was a basic change in the U.S. space program.
You know, Sputnik rung our bell, and then we went to the moon and declared victory and said it was all over.
Astronaut Wally Schirra was a TV commentator for the Apollo 17 mission. He remembers seeing the best pictures ever taken of the lunar surface and finding that the TV networks would not interrupt programs to broadcast them.
You have to have some other excitement, something adventurous. Now here we were, the 6th mission landing on the moon, and we were crying for airtime.
After 6 round trips to the moon, only 12 men from planet Earth had ever visited another world. Richard Nixon, faced with the Arab oil embargo and spiraling inflation, decided to cut back the space program at the end of Apollo 17 rather than continue to Mars. For the team that won the race to the moon, the letdown was crushing.
What do we do next? You know, where do we take this next? And that was kind of the first step in realizing that there isn't anybody out there championing the cause of NASA to go on to the next phase of development, the next phase of exploration.
It was a sad time for this nation to have responded so much, so well, by putting people on the moon, and then to not fly humans in space for six years after the Apollo program while we were defining the shuttle. That was unforgivable.
Challenger now heading downrange. The shuttle flew successfully until January 1986. Then the Challenger disaster almost ended the U.S. manned spaceflight program.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
Shuttle users, including the Pentagon, pulled out. The public and Congress began to lose faith in NASA. Meanwhile, the Russians built the Mir space station. It's been in orbit for 8 years and is the only facility of its kind anywhere. The U.S. is now committed to share the Mir with the Russians. The irony is not lost on the widow of Gus Grissom.
Yeah, I feel like my husband gave his life to beat the Russians to the moon, and now what are we doing? We're cooperating with Russia, and more or less I think that they're getting our technology, and I said, I can't buy it.
But the Clinton administration is convinced the only way for Americans to have a space station today is to share one with the Russians, because the cost of doing business in space is just too high for any single nation to go it alone.
I love antiques. I just don't want to feel like one. But when I get a regular, I feel pretty antique. Slow, sluggish. Harsh chemical laxatives aren't the answer. They can work suddenly, unexpectedly. Oh boy, can that be embarrassing? That's why I use Metamucil. Its natural fiber works with my body's natural rhythms, gets me back on track. And like they say, you're only as young as you feel.
Metamucil, the natural choice for regularity.
And Gardens Real Estate goes to work on an open house. Expect it to be closed. Don't miss your new home. Visit a Better Homes and Gardens open house this weekend.
You get anywhere with your retirement planning?
Not really. Any ideas?
I just plunked the bundle into the Husney Farrell Emerging Developing Global Balanced Biotechnology Fund. You know, I'm in the Vasco da Gama Municipal Short-Term Convertible Inverted World Income Fund. That's a keeper.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it over here, but I highly recommend the Southwest Pacific Rim Tectonic Drift Emerging Continent Contrarian Uncomfortable Investor Equity Value Fund.
You should be in that. Definitely.
What was the name of that fund again?
Difficult decision at first. But over time, it gets a lot easier to live with. Acura. Some things are worth the price.
Ahead on CNN Presents, a space odyssey for the next generation. How our children will follow in the famous footsteps of the men who walked on the moon.
The first Martians are already here on the Earth. They're probably about 12 years old. The children of today are going to become the first Martians of tomorrow.
The Apollo legacy continues in a moment.
Was it America's finest hour? Buzz Aldrin recalls Apollo 11 25 years later on Larry King Live, Tuesday night, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Body repair on today's automobiles requires high technology and dedicated professionals to do the job right. And Kirkland Body Shop is the proven leader. This is the most sophisticated alignment system on the market today, Kansas Jack. It provides total vehicle alignment to factory specifications. Laser technology allows our professionals to put your car in perfect alignment, down to the very millimeter. Today's unibody cars cannot be correctly aligned without the proper equipment. That's another example of high-tech body repair at Kirkland Body Shop, committed to providing you the best.
This is CNN.
When Jules Verne wrote From the Earth to the Moon back in 1873, it was the stuff of dreams. Now it's a page in the history books. In the same way, the science fiction of today is fast becoming the fact of tomorrow. Once again, John Holloman and John Zarella with a look at the frontiers of the future and their connection to the past.
Sometime in the not-too-distant future, perhaps the year 2019, when the planets are in perfect alignment, humans will likely leave the Earth on a 2-year mission. As the Moon was the new frontier of the 60s, Mars will lay claim to the title in the 21st century.
Mars is the only other planet in our solar system, the only other planet we know of, that has accessible water and an atmosphere in which we could process to live off of. And one could imagine habitations on Mars. So if we can make it anywhere, it's going to be on Mars.
My human instinct tells me is that I would like someone of my species to touch down on a planet, at least during my lifetime. Nothing will replace that personal voyage of the human into another planet.
Look at the size of that biggie. It is a biggie, isn't it? It may be further away than we think. No, it's not very far. It was just right beyond you. Okay, we're headed that way. You get the tongs, John? Yep. I'll carry the rake.
It would be the culmination of a dream shared by all those who saw Apollo not as the end, but the beginning of a great journey.
If you had a ship to Mars ready to go tomorrow, I could get you 50,000 volunteers tonight. If we said you got a 50-50 chance coming back, you'd still get the 50,000. That's what men are made of.
Those first pioneers to step on Martian soil will not unfurl the flag of a single nation. They will represent planet Earth.
If we could go to Mars as a planet, it would have a very unifying effect on people's brains. They would think better of the Japanese because of that Japanese fellow walking around with Americans and Russians and Europeans and Africans. It would have a very wonderful effect.
It will be a joint effort. I think that the exploration of space by man, it's a man exploration. It's not a nation exploration. So this is at the level of mankind. It's not at the level of one nation.
It will only happen if the foundation being built now out of cooperation is solid. Next year, shuttle astronaut Norm Thagard will spend 3 months on Russia's Mir space station.
I think that we're improving the cause of peace, and we're improving the cause of international cooperation, which are, to me, easily as important as beating another country to the moon.
These first building blocks will lead to the International Space Station. 34 flights using Russian launch vehicles, the shuttle, and possibly the European Ariane rocket will be needed to bring up and assemble the station. Target completion date, 2002.
The space station is not a technological test bed. It is a social test bed. It will be proof principle that Russia, Europe, Japan, Canada could work together to do things of benefit, not to build weapons aimed at each other.
Due to the lengthy and risky nature of these projects, the future, as far as major projects are concerned, depends on whether or not our countries will be able to pool their resources and efforts.
Space officials insist they have contingencies to keep the station alive, even if a player drops out. Right now, NASA's partners are showing more resolve than the U.S.
The Russians now have asked to join this space station. They canceled their own national program to join ours.
The space station will provide answers to the problem of bodily deterioration from long, deep space flights. The spaceships that take explorers to Mars may well be assembled and launched from the station. It seems the human spirit will always demand that mankind reach outward. Yet those first pioneers who land on distant planets will not be living, breathing human beings. They'll be like Voyager, our machine creations. On July 4th, 1997, after traveling 7 months at a speed of 14,000 miles per hour, a small spacecraft called Pathfinder will arrive at Mars. A unique airbag system has been designed and tested for landing on the Martian surface.
And the airbags cushion the fall, and the lander tumbles and rolls around and comes to rest. And then the petals open up like a flower, like that, and there's the rover sitting on the petal.
The rover, similar to this one being tested at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, will gingerly move out over the Martian landscape. Cameras will take pictures in 14 colors. On Earth, scientists will be watching the pictures beamed back from Mars. A laser guidance system will scan the terrain ahead, checking for obstacles and craters.
Let's say we're going along and the operator sees that the rover's about to fall over a cliff. By the time the operator can see that and then say, no, bloop. So the rover has to be smart enough to stay out of trouble.
For at least a month, scientists hope the rover will send back pictures and gather critical data on the composition of Mars. This first lander will be followed by at least a dozen others scheduled between 1997 and 2006, some combining the resources of NASA, the Russians, and Europeans.
It's going to be a decade during which we have a series of orbiter and small lander that are going to actually be the cornerstone of a global exploration of the planet Mars.
The information gathered could answer one of mankind's most troubling questions. Did some form of basic life at one time exist on the red planet? If so, what went terribly wrong? Does the same fate await our Earth?
Every year, American business wastes millions of dollars on international calls by using the wrong long-distance company. Now you don't have to waste that money. Introducing MCI's Proof Positive Worldwide. Save up to 50% off typical international calls around the world. Call by September 30th and get 1 month of free long distance. Call MCI now and put your money back in your business.
Just because your house gets dusty fast doesn't mean your blinds have to. Now Levelor blinds with Dust Guard resist 50% of the dust, and 1/2 the dust means 1/2 the dusting. Dust Guard by Levelor cuts dust by 50%. After all, don't you have enough dusting to do already?
Oh, and heaven help me, here I go again. Here I go, falling again.
Watch for falling prices at Walmart, all over the store. Always low prices, always Walmart.
Here's something different, sweetie. Constantly switching your dog's food can sometimes lead to finicky eating behavior. So feed your dog a consistent diet, Purina Dog Chow every day. It began with a dream.
Of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Relive an unforgettable moment with special guests, former astronaut Buzz Aldrin. A walk through history. Wednesday, 8:30 Eastern on CNN.
CNN Presents continues now with The Apollo Legacy.
When the Apollo 11 astronauts came back from the moon, they were isolated from everybody else, kept in a trailer out of fear they'd give a moon-bred disease to Earthlings. Outside, bands were playing, and President Richard Nixon stood by to congratulate the three-man crew.
As a result of what you've done, the world's never been closer together before.
But inside, later, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Mike Collins were watching television.
They showed us a little television of Walter Cronkite or somebody, and I just had this spontaneous sense to say to Neil, hey, look, we missed the whole thing. Because of the reaction that was going on here, that is where the significance, that was where the importance of Apollo took place. It was back here on Earth. It was that sense of jubilation and exhilaration and sharing in that. Now, how do you put a price tag on that?
But since that first moon landing, the sense of jubilation and excitement and sharing has gone out of the space program. In fact, the enthusiasm started fading soon after Apollo 11 went into the history books. John Young walked and rode on the moon on April 20th, 1972.
I think we've seen as much in 10 days as most people see in 10 lifetimes.
When we were doing Apollo, I remember one time being in a parade, and the only people who were in the parade was the people who were in the parade. There wasn't anybody on the sidelines watching. That's during the middle of the Vietnam War.
Since the beginning of the Apollo program, NASA has cost U.S. taxpayers $197 billion.
But I don't believe NASA has articulated to the Joe Q public on the street corner. He says, he looks up and he says, what am I getting out of this? You guys are spending these billions and billions. How's that helping me?
But John Glenn, first American to orbit the Earth, says it's been worth it.
The benefits on what has come out of the space program so far have benefited our economy about 7 to 1 for every dollar spent. Now, even if they're off by a considerable amount, that is still a tremendous investment for this country.
Some of NASA's greatest hits include CAT scanners and MRI imaging equipment in hospitals. The Apollo and shuttle programs gave us dustbusters and drinking water filters, and even the cellular telephone came from the space program.
More than 10,000 medical devices or procedures. I don't know how you place a value on a human life, but there are tens of thousands of people who are alive because of the heart pacemaker and the implantable insulin pump, and the list just goes on and on and on.
I was on borrowed time, but I'm not anymore.
Dick Hines is living proof.
I'm here because of the space program, put it that way. And it can't get any more important than that.
His main heart artery was 90% blocked. Normal techniques wouldn't work to clear it.
Mr. Hines, everything's going very well.
So his doctors resorted to the Excimer laser with its NASA-developed imaging system.
The laser's best applications are for cases that are difficult or even impossible for balloons. So that this is truly a tool that helps us do something we could not otherwise do.
Space-based research has led to the production and development of a lot of things we use in our everyday lives. Everything from digital watches like this to microwave ovens came from space research. Things like contact lenses that don't scratch. Even this new high-tech jogging shoe with an air-filled insole came from NASA research. And the space agency says that new developments like this are coming to market every day. Exploring the moon and other planets could have tangible benefits on Earth.
Could we lose our water? Did the moon have water and lose it? Mars has evidence of past water, but doesn't have very much left. Why did it lose it? These are such fundamental questions that have great significance for our society.
Venus got too hot, Mars got too cold, and Earth stayed just right. And understanding how those three planets evolved and why they went those separate ways is a key problem in understanding the Earth and understanding planetary science.
Has the space program been worth it? Should it continue? Those questions are the subject of continued debate in the halls of Congress. U.S. sponsorship for the International Space Station hangs in the balance. But some in Congress today are old enough to remember a day 32 years ago when one American made the case for sending humans into space.
The great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
I've installed thousands of Root air conditioning systems in the past 20 years, so I know big news when I see it. Root now uses scroll compressors in all their home cooling systems. Every air conditioner, every heat pump, every efficiency level. Scroll compressors are the most advanced technology, quieter and more reliable than standard compressors. So if you're looking for a new home cooling system, look for this symbol. It's your only assurance you're getting a scroll compressor. For the Root scroll difference, call 1-800-848-ROOT.
It's a major breakthrough in auto protectant technology. Formula 2001 Super Protectant. It provides a more brilliant, longer-lasting shine than Armor All on vinyl and leather. And look, in the Arizona desert, Formula 2001 brought back the shine to UV-faded vinyl, rubber, even leather. Get the new standard in automotive protectant technology. Formula 2001 with 50% more active shining ingredients than Armor All. Get Formula 2001 products today.
Some people are naturally faster than others. In fact, everything they do is fast. Fast, 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 fast. Now, not everyone appreciates that. But if you're looking to get a new GM car or truck financed, fast is exactly what you want.
Mac will take care of your financing.
And the folks who arrange GMAC financing and leasing are faster than just about anyone else. GMAC, the expressway home.
You forgot your sunglasses.
I'm flying high, but I've got a feeling I'm falling for nobody but you.
Watch for falling prices at Walmart, all over the store. Always low prices, always Walmart.
CNN Presents continues now with The Apollo Legacy.
Our Earth, our solar system, revolves around an average star nestled in an obscure corner of a galaxy filled with millions of other stars. Beyond it, in the incomprehensible expanse of the universe, there are millions of galaxies and billions of stars. Consider this. The Voyager 2 spacecraft left Earth more than 2 decades ago. It is just now leaving our solar system.
It takes 4.3 years for light to get from the nearest star to us. And it would take the Voyager spacecraft something like 80,000 years to get there.
Mankind will likely play in its own solar system neighborhood, perhaps visiting Mars for a weekend getaway. The kinds of polluting gases causing the greenhouse effect on Earth could be used to make Mars a habitable planet.
If we were to introduce them on Mars, would warm up the planet, melt or vaporize any carbon dioxide that's frozen into the ground and into the polar caps, and we tend to end up after not that long, maybe as soon as 100 years or so, with a thick carbon dioxide atmosphere that's warm enough that water could flow and that plants and bacteria could survive.
Long before CPR is performed on the red planet, humans may be working there, mining precious minerals. It is mankind's thirst for knowledge that will drive the engine of exploration.
If humans are destined to travel to the planets and on to the stars, it will be the children of today and tomorrow who carry out the mission. They will be the ones who turn the dreams of aging men into reality.
The first Martians are already here on the Earth. They're probably about 12 years old. The children of today are going to become the first Martians of tomorrow.
Thousands of school children a week come to Space Center Houston. Here they can touch what they learn about in history books.
Adam, you're touching the moon. Can you believe it? Let me in there.
Is that what the moon feels like?
That's what the moon feels like.
There's a whole bunch of mess in space that people don't know about, so they're going to explore it and find out about stuff.
We're the ones going up right now, and it'll probably take a while for them to find out the right fuel and stuff to get to Mars. And we'll probably be the ones going to Mars.
And then one day we'll be going up there and coming back and telling people about it.
Or will humanity turn inward? Its children visiting the planets and the stars through the world of virtual reality. Never leaving the Earth, we could go back to the moon, fly through the rings of Saturn, or ski Olympus Mons, the largest mountain on Mars.
Will we be so satisfied with the creation of virtual worlds that we'll never want to go to the real world? It's a frightening thought.
In a sense, that is the world Alan Bean now lives in. Bean the astronaut walked on the moon a quarter-century ago. Now, with a brush and an easel, Alan Bean the artist returns there.
I'm 25 years from the moon, yet almost on a daily basis I'm visiting one of the sites. This was the Taurus Littrow Valley. Apollo 17 landed there. This is the Sea of Tranquility here, where Apollo 11 landed, and of course a painting of mine would be on the Ocean of Storms. So to some degree I travel around the moon on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Only a dozen human beings in the whole of history have ever set foot on another world.
The real legacy of Apollo is the culmination of the human endeavor. You know, the vision of a president, the courage, the effort, the dedication, the unswerving commitment of a nation of people who together did something that I'm sure they all believed at that point in time probably couldn't be done.
To be detached from it, to see the Earth as a disk floating in the ocean of space with no borders, no boundaries, that too is the Apollo legacy.
It has color, and it's just a magnificent sight in this dark black background.
Like looking at a picture hanging on a black wall of the Earth.
To launch director Rocco Petrone, the legacy was summed up best by Jordan's King Hussein.
He said, my people have the little transistor radio glued to their ear. They're probably living in a tent with the wind blowing sand, you know, they had their little teaspoon of rice for the day. And he said, when you fly, we fly with you.
Gene Cernan was the last man to walk on the moon.
That's beautiful. This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you.
If I could go back to the moon, particularly to a spot that I'd been, to the Valley of Taurus Littrow, to where I scribbled my daughter's initials in the sands, to where I left the rover, to where we lived, to a place we called home, I would do that in a minute.
And as we leave the moon in Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return.
Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate goes to work on an open house, expect it to be closed. Don't miss your new home. Visit a Better Homes and Gardens open house this weekend.
There are several ways to send a package overseas. Most are reliable and quick. But when it comes to price, they can't compete. Because Express Mail International will get your package abroad for as little as $11.50. Most other published rates don't even come close. We fly worldwide, starting at about half the price. Express Mail International from the Postal Service. When you don't want to spend a bundle, we deliver for you. Call for a free information kit.
A bowling ball, a pineapple, a birthday cake, a Nokia cellular phone. One of these objects would make it easier for me to juggle my schedule.
He's a juggler. You're not. Pick up a Nokia cellular phone to help you juggle your schedule. Nokia, largest European cellular phone manufacturer, now in America.
Most luxury cars are assembled with spot welds. But for the J30, Infiniti adopted a process called weld bonding that bonds entire seams. Over time, flex and stress can cause looseness and rattles, but when the entire seam is sealed, body flex is reduced for a strong, quiet body that lasts longer. Visit your Infiniti showroom.
Now, for a limited time, lease one of the world's most advanced automobiles with no down payment.
Here's something different, sweetie.
Sudden changes in your dog's diet can sometimes lead to stomach discomfort. So feed your dog a consistent diet. Purina Dog Chow every day.
The Apollo 11 mission clinched the most coveted trophy of the space race, the moon. But even President Kennedy, who was credited with beginning the space race with the Soviets, believed that joint space exploration would be the result. He was right, and a new legacy will soon be born. Now here's a look at what is ahead on next week's program.
The explosion of legalized gambling.
15-year call.
A sure bet to some.
800 jobs, minimum 800 jobs.
A huge gamble to others.
I can't remember anything that has divided the community as much as this has.
As more and more governments cash in on the gambling craze, who wins, who loses?
You now have the state gambling against its own citizens.
As CNN presents The Gamble.
For CNN Presents, I'm Judy Woodruff. Thanks for joining us.
To purchase a home video of this program, please have your credit card ready and call 1-800-799-7676. The cost is $19.98 plus $4.95 shipping and handling.